A San Francisco contractor doing a bit of work in a client's backyard discovered a casket that contained the body of an unidentified little girl. The casket was made from metal and had 2 viewing windows in the lid, kind of like Sleeping Beauty. The casket was sealed, preserving the body of the girl inside, but the mystery here was that the coffin appeared to come from the 1800s, meaning it had been buried in the client's backyard for possibly 200 years. According to ABC News, the girl was identified as Edith Howard Cook, who died on October 13, 1876, at the young age of only 2. She had been buried in her family plot back in 1876, but that family plot later became the site of a residency in San Francisco's Lone Mountain neighborhood. All burials stopped in 1902. Most of the remains were exhumed and then transferred to a new cemetery, but apparently the body of Edith had been left behind. Researchers have said that the awful conditions of urban living in the 1800s and possibly an infectious disease led to her ultimate death. The young girl has since been provided with a proper burial and grave plot in Colma's Green Lawn Cemetery. Number 9. Mysterious River Cubes. A magnet fisherman recently pulled 60 mysterious cubes out of a river in England. Each of the 60 cubes found by the fisherman and his sons depict what experts believe are sacred numerical inscriptions written in Sanskrit. The blocks appear to be made out of lead. They are small enough to hold between your finger and thumb, and each one is decorated with a neat grid and curious writings. In a desperate attempt to make some sense out of the cubes, he posted pictures of them to social media. He immediately got some responses, and it turned out that the cubes may have been connected to a type of Hindu prayer ritual. They definitely appeared Indian in origin, and the writings on them could have been incantations used for prayers, which were only effective when throwing the cube into running water. Number 8. The Buried Ship. The last place anyone expected to find a buried ship was underneath Ground Zero, but when construction began on the One World Trade Center, deep underground, workers once again hit something surprising. It was the hull of a ship underneath the ground where the New York City World Trade Center once stood. The boat had been buried underneath the center for 200 years. According to CNN, the boat has since been traced back to Philadelphia in the colonial era. Research done by the Tree Ring Research Laboratory helped to date the ship using the rings and the white oak from its frame. They figured out that the wood was probably cut down in 1773. It was found about 22 feet underground, inside of what was once the bottom of a river. The ship was probably used for between 20 and 30 years, sailing along lower Manhattan until at some point it sank and floated to the bottom of the river. Then it was eventually covered over by trash and fill material that was used to extend the shoreline of Manhattan in a big project to expand the island. Many years later, the World Trade Center was built on top. Number 7. Egyptian Mummy Workshop. While performing some ordinary archaeological digs near the Unas Pyramid in Memphis, the old capital of ancient Egypt, experts stumbled upon an extraordinarily rare and very unexpected discovery. They found a mummification workshop that dates back 2,500 years. The workshop had likely been used in rituals to embalm and prepare dead bodies for mummification and their journey into the afterlife. The workshop was found with an embalmer's toolkit, including pottery vessels, measuring cups, and other interesting paraphernalia. The workshop was probably used between 664 and 404 BC. Many of the embalmer's leftover artifacts should be able to help modern scientists figure out the chemical composition of many of the oils used in the mummification process. Number 6. The Sarmatian Warrior Woman. Russian archaeologists have unearthed a very impressive tomb with some serious historical significance. They discovered the tomb of a Sarmatian female warrior who apparently worshipped fire. The tomb was discovered complete with 100 arrowheads, a collection of knives, a sword, and a horse harness. All of these artifacts have led researchers to believe the woman was a warrior. She was also found with gems, gold, and other jewelry that indicates a high social status. If you're not sure who the Sarmatians were, they were nomadic people who lived between the 5th century BC and the 4th century AD throughout Moldova and Ukraine, as well as Russia and Iran. The women often fought alongside the men in war and battle. If they were married, they would be buried along with their spouses. According to experts working with the Institute of Archaeology at the Russian Academy of Sciences, there were 29 burial mounds accidentally discovered during the construction of a new airport. Most of the tombs had already been pillaged, and so finding the warrior's tomb fully intact and full of artifacts was a huge surprise. Number 5. Indigenous Ritual Pillar. Some unexpected historical treasure was recently discovered on a beach in Victoria, Vancouver Island. A pillar that apparently belonged to a local indigenous group was found by a person wandering along Dallas Road Beach at low tide. According to the Royal BC Museum, the pillar was indeed a genuine indigenous artifact. It was believed to be a Lekwungen ritual stone pillar used in ancient ceremonies such as puberty rites, feeding of the dead, and to celebrate the first salmon. The chief of the Songhees Nation told local news media that the discovery of the pillar was a clear reminder of the long history of the indigenous people living in the region. It was initially believed that it had been perched on a seaside cliff, but at some point in the 20th century, it had fallen into the ocean, where it eventually appeared on the shore. However, the excitement soon turned to controversy when a local artist came forward to say that it was not actually an artifact at all, but simply a piece of stone that he had carved for fun. The local museum was forced to go back and properly test the statue to see how old it truly was. For now, the pillar is being hidden away until they can figure it out. Number 4. The Head of Hermes. Roadwork in Athens uncovered yet another outstanding archaeological treasure. This wasn't a mummy or a secret tomb, it was instead the severed head of Hermes. Of course, it wasn't a real head of flesh and bone, but the likeness of the Greek messenger god. The head was found underneath Aeolus Street, which in ancient Greece would have been at the very heart of the bustling city of Athens. One of the most impressive finds was in 1885, when the statue of Hercules was discovered just across the street from where road workers accidentally found the head of Hermes. Hercules was found naked with a lion slung over his left shoulder. The workers didn't manage to find the rest of the statue. Still, the Ministry of Culture is working hard to restore Hermes' head to its former glory. Number 3. The Puffin Island Rabbit Hole. The small island of Stockholm off the coast of Wales was a popular tourist destination before the pandemic, but with no visitors going to the island, its caretakers didn't have much to do. So one day, while wandering the island, one of the caretakers found a prehistoric tool from the Stone Age sitting inside of a rabbit hole. The tool ended up dating back 9,000 years and was probably used for either cracking shellfish open or for preparing seal hides. The next day, a burial urn dating back almost 4,000 years was found inside of the same rabbit hole. This is nothing short of incredible, especially since the island has basically been uninhabited for hundreds of years. The Vikings inhabited the island during the 10th or 11th centuries, but now it turns out that human habitation of Stockholm Island goes way further back. As of right now, nobody has any idea who these ancient people may have been, though they could have been using the island for hunting seals. Number 2. The Mysterious Box. Workers in the east of China were trying to widen a road in the city of Taizhou when they came across the strangest discovery ever. The road workers were about 6 feet below the surface when they hit something solid. It turned out to be a buried tomb. Professional archaeologists had to be called in to investigate the mystery, and what they discovered was a hidden chamber underneath the city streets dating back 700 years. Encased inside the stone tomb was a slightly smaller wooden box, and inside of the box was the mummy of a woman soaking in a bloody red liquid and buried under layers of fabric and clothing. The coffin had somehow been encased nearly 1,000 years ago, and the body of the woman inside was almost perfectly preserved. Experts have since claimed her to be a prominent member of the Ming Dynasty. She was found wearing extremely expensive jewelry and wrapped in very expensive garments. She's been transferred into the care of professional archaeologists and will be going on display at a local museum in China. Number 1. More Dead Sea Scrolls. The original Dead Sea Scrolls are said to have been found completely by accident by a sheep herder in some caves near the Dead Sea of Israel. That was back in 1947, and they are still one of the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century. The Israel Antiquities Authority recently announced in late 2020 that even more of these mysterious biblical scrolls have just been found in the Judean desert. The findings came while Israel authorities were checking out a desert cave system, but they had never imagined that they would find even more amazing relics. The missing pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls were found inside of what has been called the Cave of Horror. 20 fragments were discovered, and now the number has gone up to 80, all dating back to the 1st century AD. Some of the fragments include texts from the Book of the 12 Minor Prophets, written in Greek. When it was discovered in 1952, the cave was filled with the remains of 40 men, women, and children, all of which had apparently been hiding from the Romans back between 132 and 136 AD. These people had likely starved to death hiding in the cave.